Okay, it's 2 o'clock. People always are a couple minutes late, but we'll start anyway. Uh, Hi, Corenia. How are you?
Hi, I'm so well. Thank you for having me today.
And so to those who are already here, thanks. And for those that are coming or see this in recording, thanks. Brian Young. I'm the Executive Director at Action Network. And we thought it'd be really interesting to talk to not just today, but we're going to start talking to the people that we work with, partners of ours, others who are doing really interesting things on topics that, because one of the things from the very beginning when we started Action Network, it's not just about the tools, it's about really power building for the progressive movement and being able to share stories so that people can be inspired or especially to learn. And today we'll be talking about public safety and transitioning some systems of policing into public safety and how that has been going in Minneapolis, which has, of course, been a center of a lot of discussion. And hopefully people can see ways that they can sort of be inspired and take some lessons out that they can apply to their own areas. So today we are talking to Corenia. And if you want to just take a minute, introduce yourself and just, how did you come to this work personally?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name's Corenia. I use she, her pronouns. I am a Black queer cis woman with a background in nursing. I am working at the intersection of policy, politics, and campaigning, and I am always striving to actualize a reproductive justice lens within my work. And I came to this really through my organizing background and foundation being in reproductive justice, and have just been super excited to have the opportunity to advance the mission, vision, and values of Yes for Minneapolis towards truly embodying transformative justice. I really believe that to transform systems, we must transform our relationships to be ones rooted in collective care, accountability, and growth. And so before joining Yes for Minneapolis, I worked at Reclaim the Block, a part of their organizing team where I managed our multiracial coalition building.
And what is Yes for Minneapolis?
Yeah.
And how did it grow out of, because it grew directly out of the Reclaim the Block work, correct?
Yeah. So Yes for Minneapolis is a campaign. It's Black-led. It's a coalition model campaign that is seeking to replace the Minneapolis Police Department with a new Department of Public Safety by amending our current Minneapolis City Charter. And so a little bit of background on that is following the murder of George Floyd last summer, we witnessed the young, brown, indigenous people spark a global uprising against state-sanctioned violence right here in Minneapolis. And our community demanded our city leaders move away from the violent policing to create a new department that addresses community safety holistically and with a public health approach. And so our community, our people were able to push our city council to unanimously support amending the charter and do just that. And they ended up getting blocked by our charter commission from the ballot. And so currently the Minneapolis City Charter requires that the city maintain a police department with a minimum number of sworn officers on staff per resident. And so once that was blocked in the summer, our campaign reignited, our coalition stayed together and reignited that fight just this winter. And so, but we have amended it in the sense that we're moving a people's petition. Leading with a people's petition is really one of the strongest ways that we feel like we are able to guarantee that not only that this be on the ballot, but that people get to decide what this looks like and that it be led by a community model.
And what you mentioned, when George Floyd was murdered, of course, Darnell Frazier's video really sort of brought it to everyone's attention. But Reclaim the Block was already around. And I was just, if you could talk about the context that kind of happened within and the organizing that had come before that and how that shifted and impacted what happened then.
Yeah, and I love that because it's so key and important that people remember that this has come from pre-existing organizing, that the movement to change the Minneapolis Police Department to change our city charter. It didn't just pop up out of nowhere. Folks have been organizing around MPD, around changing the infrastructure, around the policing budget. And this campaign is really just building off that work. And so, yeah, Reclaim the Block had been around since 2018, was a ragtag group of folks who decided to organize around the budget and the budget cycle every year. And it's really like those activities and that organizing, not just from organizations, but from people also, that's really rooted in putting into practice the lessons learned from folks before us, as well as our direct experience in building coalitions and building partnerships in order to shape an abolitionist future for Black people across Minnesota. And so I think that the movement to change the Minneapolis charter just really empowers us as Minneapolis residents to use our collective power and take the city in a new direction.
And was the how did Darnella Frazier's video, because it was my impression at the time that it some of that organizing led directly to it getting into like city councilors' hands really quickly. And your point, because it's something I am passionate about, that these moments become impactful because of the context in which they happen and the organizing that has happened before. And there are moments, like Darnella Frazier stopping to take that video.
Yeah.
That honor that moment, but also know that it became what it is because of all the work that has gone around it. And there was very specific sort of effects of that, wasn't there?
Yeah, definitely. I think there are pieces around, community being able to have the transparency, community being able to see, and I think even some actual change that came out of that is perhaps that's even why they decided to live stream the trial, which in a lot of ways was transparent and also traumatizing for a lot of people to see that consistently available on a daily basis. But I think that, yeah, the power of that video and being able to see that and it being, the primary piece of community knowing what happened and community having seen what happened and the nation seeing what happened. And yeah, that there have been folks on the ground in Minneapolis who were able to say like, yeah, we need to organize around this and have a rapid response.
Mm. And one of the things you said earlier about sort of transforming, you can't get a systemic sort of transformation of public safety without thinking of transforming relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of going back to that and think of your, just kind of, I was thinking about the because you just mentioned just now the sort of the trauma that can be incurred by seeing both the original and everyone in the Twin Cities living, and a lot of us all around the country living through that sort of moment, and the way it impacted our own communities. And just how the organizing, how that both kind of general sort of tactically led to, yes, for Minneapolis, but also it's just, I think it's a key point about organizing, in that transformation of relationships, and that taking moments like that and applying, as a community, being able to react to that, and the connections and the trust that grow up out of organizing being so critical to that kind of transformation that you were talking about earlier. And you can go either as organizationally, but also just yourself, how that how that impacted you, how that has shaped the journey of the last what year almost.
Yeah, I mean, Minneapolis is really transformed in a lot of ways. And I think, something that's coming up for me is just like George Floyd Square, and that being like an autonomous community zone, and people really like holding that down and demonstrating and practicing the community-led alternatives to safety. It really allowed community to be connected in ways that we really needed to stay, even during this pandemic. And I think has allowed for us to have a place that we can go to, a place and a space that's centering us, that's centering our experience, that's centering the healing, the love, and community, in a lot of ways that's really been disrupted for years. And Yeah, and I also think that's like one embodiment of it, right? And I think coalitions are another embodiment of it, and folks being able to move organizations, move their bases, move and mobilize folks in the right direction and in support of where we know folks have indicated that they're ready for. I think, us having exceeded the goal of 20,000 signatures for the People's Petition is just really indicative that what we already knew, Minneapolis residents are ready for change and for that to be systemic change, and are really enthused about that.
And then, when you talk about the kind of vision of public safety, versus policing, and, because just what you're talking about, that transformative quality of relationships, how do you see that reflected in the vision of public safety and what Yes for Minneapolis is trying to achieve?
Yeah. And I love that the link, I think, to the website was dropped in there. So our amendment language is around implementing a new Department of Public Safety. And some key pieces in that is that it has a comprehensive public health approach to safety, and if necessary, includes licensed peace officers. What I love is that, a lot of the organizing around the budget has been saying that, our police department isn't fully equipped to deal with all of the responses to community concerns and safety. A lot of people across the nation have been doing criminal justice reforms, police accountability, and advocating for housing, for mental health resources, for violence prevention, for substance abuse and safe consumption sites. There's so many things that tie into the health of our community that directly tie into the sense of safety that community feels. And so I think it's, without addressing the underlying conditions that are present when violence happens, then those are just some of the pieces that will continuously be missing. And there's been organizing around MPD 150. There are lots of collectives and groups here in Minnesota, and one of the key pieces that I love from their report and analysis that they've done of the Minneapolis Police Department over the last 150 years is that we still have they haven't addressed our most urgent concerns. And so I think it's just really clear in that sense that there's a lot of changes that need to happen, and community is very well aware of them and are now just being empowered in finding the right tools to be able to go about those changes.
And what are those tools? Like, how are you going about, and even what is the coalition? You mentioned a couple of times this is a real coalition approach, but kind of what is the coalition and how are you trying to go about that
Yeah.
change building?
Yes. So some of the members of our coalition are on our website that's consistently trying to be updated and caught up with folks that are joining. But our coalition is really broad, actually, of Minneapolis-based organizations, and some in St. Paul even, since they're very much tied together. But it's a lot of progressive orgs, indigenous orgs, labor unions. But we also have folks who are directly impacted by policing, like our Sex Workers Outreach Project, and Release Minnesota 8, our Little Earth community. I think that our coalition is just really, really good in that we have been really intentional about being in principled struggle with folks, that even if someone isn't, is on the spectrum of abolition, being really clear about what it is that we're wanting and what our goals are. And I think as far as the tools, the ballot measure is a tool that people can use to force action from legislators or even bypass them altogether. And we've really taken a lot of lessons learned from cities and states across the country who have worked to utilize ballot measures process to be able to push forward progressive policies.
And how do you hold, I mean, I certainly have been, and probably people listening have been in plenty of coalitions, and they range in a lot of different ways, how tight they are, how loose they are, how effective they are. How do you work together on this because just the people you named, it's a broad coalition of groups, labor unions, community action. There's all kinds of people in there. How do you keep it together?
Yeah. I think our coalition has even had some shifts and evolutions since we've launched. And right, I think some of the pieces is like our coalition is broad and everyone knows their lane. Everyone is really clear about the intersecting strategy. People are really clear about where it is that they have capacity and what it is that they're providing, right? Some people are able to, contribute staff time. Some people have a volunteer base that they're able to mobilize. Some people just have a lot of talent and expertise around campaign structure, organizing, and around electoral politics. And I think, we've also been really clear about like where the decision-making places are held. And have transitioned from our coalition holding some of those pieces to having a steering committee and a Black advisory table. And again, being really, really consistent and explicit around our values, and around our agreements and how those things happen.
Yeah, it's into the advisory council you just mentioned there. I want you to dig in on that a little bit, because I think that's something sometimes people miss, to get a really good community-based advisory group.
Yeah, our Black advisory table really came out of the idea that, I think sometimes these measures get kind of seen as just radical organizers. And we really wanted to make sure that this wasn't just that. Really wanted to disrupt that dominant culture or narrative of who's leading the work and who's directly impacted by it. And so we decided to implement a Black advisory table that is overseeing the full arc of the campaign and the strategy, and is part of the decision making, in which we use a consensus-based model for decision making. And so they set like the vision, the structure, the operating principles and values of the campaign, and that happened first. And then from there, that they continue to be deeply involved in inviting folks in developing the steering committee and hiring the campaign staff. So that was one of the things for our advisory table.
So they were directly involved in hiring staff.
Yep. Yeah.
That's
and we wanted it to be, beyond Black organizers, but just everyday folks who were just interested in being involved and making sure that it was one, accessible, but also that folks had the opportunity and felt invited to be a part of it.
And now so going forward, this is where's the campaign right now? Like, do you have to get it on the ballot? Is that the next step? And then, just where are you? And then what comes after that?
Yeah. So the first step was meeting a requirement for the People's Petition, which was 11,900 valid signatures. So our aim and threshold was 20,000 signatures. And so we've now exceeded that. So next week, Friday, actually, we're filing the petition. So super, super excited about that. And then from there, we are going to be kind of going into our persuasion phase of the campaign. And then from there into our like GOTV, get out the vote phase. But yeah, our immediate next step is just filing the petition, and probably some celebratory events and such. And May, the end of May is towards the anniversary of George Floyd's death. And so really just honoring and giving tribute to like where this has come from.
And when is the ballot? When is the election?
Yeah, it is November 2nd.
This year?
So yep, this year there's going to be a lot of things on the ballot as far as what voters get to determine, which is really, really exciting. This is a really big year of municipal elections. Our mayor's up, all of our city council seats are up. And so this was just an opportune time to make sure that Minneapolis residents get involved and engage and say exactly what it is that they envision for Minneapolis.
What does the opposition look like to this?
Yeah, our opposition, for sure last year our opposition was the Charter Commission, which is an unelected bureaucratic body. I think this year our opposition will definitely be folks who identify as police allies, pro-police folks, and our police federation, That's for sure who we know our opposition will be.
And this is coming a little bit out left field. I don't know if there's an answer to this, but the origin of the that charter about the police, where did that come from in Minneapolis? That they had to have X number of police for X number of residents. Do you know?
I think I know it came from way back when. Our city charter is kind of like our city constitution, which outlines the functions of the city. I think that it's pretty typical and standard in some sense of, implementing and making sure that you're protecting the property and such of the city. So.
Yeah, it's, and like I said, it was out of left field, but it's interesting because, like you said, these things are so common, and that they're there from the beginning, from the founding, and back to your original point of transforming our relationships and transforming, the relationships of the, there's just it's working on multiple axes here, transforming the relationships of the public officials to the community, transforming the relationships of the people and the government, and it's such a central sort of issue to talk about is public safety and everything that goes into that. And then after let's assume it wins. And then what happens after that? Is there another, there's more organizing that has to happen to actually implement and change, once it's possible, I assume. If the charter is changed, it's possible, but then it's got to get implemented.
Yeah, exactly. So we win our support come November. I think we have the city has 30 days to implement the charter changes. And there's like multiple parallel things that are going to be moving. So in the summer, we'll be organizing with the council to create ordinances that really specify in detail what the new department will be looking like. And then also it's through ordinance, which is like laws, where some other like really key pieces of this new department will be coming from, and that's going to be led with the council. But then I think another key piece is that this campaign specifically is, again, part of a longer term strategy. So the campaign, it being tied to voting, being tied to election, all those things will end. And so when this campaign ends, the intention is that it folds into these longer term pieces where organizations and organizers can then continue it and pick it up and then leverage it in the rest of our organizing across the city, and that hopefully other folks across the country can take note.
And speaking of that, across the country, have you talked to people in other communities? I mean, what can either existing conversations or just how you see other communities being able to take up this work?
Yeah, I think that there are quite a few people moving ballot measures this year. Haven't yet connected with the folks in Ohio, but connected with the Fix SAPD in San Antonio who are moving a ballot measure this spring, and then again, hopefully in the fall. And I think a key piece is just like, choosing the tool that's going to best help you. And for some folks, it might not be ballot measures. I think in Minneapolis, moving a ballot measure was kind of new, or like changing the charter was kind of a new thing, and for it to be led by the people. So I think that that's a piece. I also think that it's super important and critical that we all stay in touch, that we all share the learnings that we've had, and that we continue to grow our sense of like advisory, the folks that we check in on, the folks that we could have to call or to text and whenever things go awry, or that's really key pieces. It's like being in community and have solidarity around these really profound changes.
And are there ways that people, is there any entryway into that existing community, into the if people want to join in, they're doing the work, they didn't even know others are doing it, are there gathering, so to speak, but different ways people can connect into that community?
Yeah, I would say like just start with like the easiest and hardest part is just reaching out often, and just making a first connection and saying hello. Like, you know, again, like I said at the beginning, we have to transform our relationships to each other, to be rooted in collective care. And so I think that literally it can be as simple as reaching out and saying hello to someone and saying, like, you know, how can I plug in, or this is work that I've already been doing and, you know, want to continue to expand and grow. So I think that that's an easy way to do that.
Yeah, and you know, how were there resources that you drew on, and Yes from Minneapolis drew on, or was it really you really had to kind of build it all from scratch?
You know, our coalition, again, just really came through, have really been full of a lot of really great folks who knew what they were doing, but then also it's been a lot of learning along the way and a lot of in some sense like redoing. But you know, some folks in our coalition that have been really great is you know, Reclaim the Block, ACLU Minnesota, some folks who have also just been deep within it the whole time. Like I said, the Take Action Minnesota, some of our labor union folks, our Minnesota Youth Collective has been really huge in figuring out some of the pieces along the way. Yeah.
Any last things we haven't touched on that you want to make sure people know about, either the work or how to go forward, or anything?
Yeah, I would say that now is the time. I think that our communities in our country are really prime to be able to make some of these changes and are really craving it, and maybe just don't know the direction to funnel some of that energy in. And so I think getting connected, if folks aren't already, to the Yes from Minneapolis campaign, but also within your own communities, and really determining like what is it that you all desire. I think a big thing that has been amplified with COVID is a sense of pods and folks connecting, you know, either on their block or within their family or community, and having really key folks that you go to. And so yeah, I would say continuing to be in community, and then expanding that community when folks are ready, and having these conversations.
And then why don't we just wrap on your website, any sort of anything you want to point people to?
Yeah, our website's Yes for Minneapolis. Feel free to check it out and review our coalition, review our amendment language as a starting point if folks are interested in making any changes. And you can get some understanding of what a people's petition is, and why we chose to do that as our tool for being able to make these changes.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you.
Thank
It
you
was
all
great
so
to talk
much.
to you, Corenia. Yeah, thanks everybody. And we've been recording it, so we'll get this up for people who couldn't be here today and spread it around, and we'll send it to you, Corenia, of course, so you can spread it around too. All right. Thank you. It's good talking to you. Again. See ya. Thanks everyone. Bye.